Okay, for today's notes, we are going to be looking at the affluent society of the 1950s. So, first of all, what does the word affluent mean? In this case, the word affluent means people that have money, maybe people that are a little higher up in socioeconomic status. If a person is said to be a person of affluency, it usually means that it's a person of wealth, someone that likes the finer things in life. But to give you an example of affluency, some of you may have heard of this case. This actually happened about 4 or 5 years ago, but it was down in Texas, and there was a mother and daughter that had gotten a flat tire, and so they pulled off alongside the road, and a couple other individuals stopped to help. Well, while they were while everyone was trying to get the tire fixed, a pickup with a 16-year-old driving who had been drinking along with some of his buddies came barreling down the road and ended up crashing into these individuals that had stopped to help. The mother and daughter were killed, and one of the men who was a pastor that stopped to help was also killed. The defense that was put in place for the driver was that he suffered from what is called affluenza, which means that as he was growing up, he was always given absolutely everything that he wanted because money was never a problem for the family, and he was never told no. So therefore, because he was always given exactly what he wanted and he was never told no, he didn't know right from wrong. And so when he got behind the wheel of his pickup and he had been drinking and he was driving drunk, he did not realize what the potential repercussions for his actions could do. So therefore, he should not be held responsible. And believe it or not, a judge and a jury bought that defense, and the kid got off with only having to go to treatment at what was the equivalent of a five-star hotel in Malibu up in the hills overlooking the ocean. His parents had to pay for it. I think it cost like $200,000, but to them, that was nothing. So that just kind of gives you, that's just a little story about what does affluency mean. The affluent society in the 1950s, we're talking about what did it mean to have wealth, or that a lot of people of the 1950s had wealth. So first of all, the affluent society. Um, I've said this time and time again, the 1950s was a decade of prosperity. Average family income tripled during the 1950s. So a family that was making $15,000 at the beginning of the decade, by the end of the decade was making $45,000. Home ownership soared to over 60%. If you're going to own a home, you have to have a good steady income, and people had that in the 50s. And people were willing to spend money. They're making money, they're spending money. By spending money, it means more has to be produced, which means there's more jobs, and you just have this positive business cycle. Not only that, there was also something else, a new trend or new fad that started in the 1950s, and this really contributed to a booming economy as well, and that was the rise of suburbia. People didn't want to live in the city anymore. Everybody has a car. They can drive into work. Kids have cars. They can go to a friend's house. They can drive into town. They can get what they want. And so what happened was a guy by the name of Bill Levitt bought um, an area of land just outside of New York City. And he had this idea. He was basically going to mass produce homes. Now, it's not like these were going to be prefabricated homes where You basically build half of a house and then the other half of the house, and then you basically put it together, and you have a whole house. They were all still going to be built individual, board by board, 2x4 by 2x4. But because they were so similar in style, they were going to be fairly easy to build. But at the same time, they had enough differences that families felt as if they had their own identity. So here is a video about Levittown. And not only did people buy into the concept, but where people move, businesses will follow. And this video does a good job of depicting that.
Years ago, this was a vast checkerboard of potato farms on New York's Long Island. Today, a community of 60,000 persons living in 15,000 homes, all built by one firm. This is Levittown, one of the most remarkable housing developments ever conceived. The idea that came to a man named Bill Levitt was this: why not apply to the building of houses the same principles that have brought other American industries to their unexcelled peaks of efficiency and service? Why not mass produce the elements that go to make up a house, just as the auto industry does with the parts that go into a new car? Bill Levitt had some other ideas. Put kitchen and bathroom back to back and let them share the same plumbing. Let your plumbers do their work without interruption and without waiting for the carpenter or the bricklayer to get out of the way. Pre-cut your lumber so it's all ready to be assembled into the frame of a house. With the waste removed, one truck can deliver to the building site all the rough lumber that will go into 2 complete Levitt homes. It's really a matter of organization and planning, getting rid of waste motion. When the foundation is ready, coils for the radiant heating are there. Not a day too soon or a day too late. Without delay, the steam fitters finish their work and move on to the next house, and right behind them come the masons to lay the underflooring. Power-driven trowels make the job a lot easier and faster. Levittown houses are not prefabricated. Prefabrication means a factory operation in which large quantities of materials are kept moving to the workers. Here the opposite is true. The construction crews are moved to a waiting line of materials. This sort of organization and efficiency is all important in the vast defense housing program. That's the next order of business for the nation's home builders. The architecture of the houses in Levittown is varied enough to eliminate dreary monotony, while at the same time enough alike to permit the savings that result from standardization. Many housing projects are a sea of mud when it rains, but not this one. A wide range of color schemes also brings variety. So here's the home that cost its happy owners just $9,000. And that includes such extras as a completely equipped kitchen, a 2-way fireplace, a finished room in the attic, and even a washing machine. The living room. Levittown is a community of young people, and that means a great need for schools. Space has been set aside for plenty of them. Dotted here and there throughout the huge area are shopping centers where every type of product or service is readily available. Shoe stores, five and dimes, department stores, supermarkets, and banks. In addition, there are other facilities designed to draw residents together to help make them feel they are part of a real community. Recreation centers with provisions for filling leisure hours, summer or winter. Yes, that old potato patch has come to a good end.
Okay, so you can see what Levittown did. And then what happens with Bill Levitt just outside of New York City this starts to become a very common theme all over the United States. And so you have families that are willing to move outside of the cities. The problem, though, is that there is some repercussion from this. The people that stay in the inner cities or stay in the cities, these are the people that cannot afford to move. They don't have the money. But the problem is that when people start to move, businesses are going to follow. Are you going to keep your business in an area where the reason why the people that are there is because they can't afford to move? Or are you going to take your business and are you going to move it out to these individuals that just built new homes? And so the people leave, the businesses leave, and then what you end up with are parts of cities that really start to deteriorate quite rapidly. So just like we did yesterday in class, there was a lot of good that came about from the 50s, but one of the negative byproducts was the rise in juvenile delinquency. Levittown and the rise of suburbia had a lot of good things that went along with it, definitely more good than bad. But on the flip side, you had a rise of poverty in the inner cities, and crime and everything else that went along with that in the inner cities increased dramatically as well. Okay, now we're going to go to families. The baby boom. Depending on what source of information you use, all of them are going to say the baby boom started in 1946, which it did. Some are going to say that it ended in 1961. Others are going to say that it ended in 1964, so it just kind of depends. But you can see with this chart right here, the marked increase right after the war. Here's 1945. Then look what happened in 1946. Then you had a little bit of a drop off. Then all throughout the 1950s, you see this marked increase in the number of babies that are being born. And then you can see that as we get through the 60s and on into the early 70s, it drops off. Then we get to the 80s again. Now all of a sudden, you see that there's an increase. The reason for this second increase is because these baby boomers here, those that are born here, now they start having kids here. So the baby boom generation, well, you're going to need more homes. Remember, we said that one of the things that happened when Eisenhower was president was he cut funding to schools. That's going to come back and bite him, because now you have this large number of kids right here, and they're entering elementary school all at once. Then they're entering junior high and then high school all at once. And the numbers are greater than the facilities. And so all of a sudden, that cut to school budgets that seemed like the right thing to do early on now couldn't have been more wrong. And so our country's really going to have to get itself caught back up to speed as far as providing for kids properly are concerned. But here's some other information about baby boomers. Well, we have these two videos to watch. I'm going to stop this right now because if I try to show it, we're going to run out of time. So this will be continued on to section 2 of chapter 21, section 3 notes.